You think minus 30 degrees Celsius impossible to survive? Imagine living in it for months with no heater, no electricity, no supermarket, no rescue team. And yet the Vikings didn't just survive Scandinavian winters. They thrived. Here's what school never told you. Winter in the north wasn't just cold. It was dark for weeks. The sun barely showed its face. The sea froze. Crops died. Animals disappeared. So how did entire families stay alive? First surprise, they didn't fight the cold. They built around it. Viking longhouses were not pretty wooden cabins. They were low, thick, and built like shields against the wind. Walls packed with turf, roofs layered with earth. When snow fell, they didn't panic. Snow became insulation. The colder it got outside, the warmer it stayed inside. But warmth alone wasn't enough. What about food? No farming in frozen soil. No fresh vegetables. Here's the twist. Vikings prepared for winter all summer. They dried fish until it turned rock hard, smoked meat for months, fermented dairy, pickled everything. Food didn't rot, it transformed, and that transformation saved lives. But storage creates another problem. Theft. Hunger makes enemies. So Viking communities stayed tight. Winter wasn't survived alone. It was survived together. Families, warriors, elders, children, all under one roof. And that roof wasn't quiet. Stories were told. Sagas were born. Winter became training season. Boys learned combat indoors. Tools were repaired. Ships were planned for spring raids. While Europe hid from winter, Vikings prepared to conquer it. Still, one question remains. How did they sleep in that cold? Animal skins, layer upon layer. Wool, not cotton. Wool, traps, heat even when wet. And they understood something modern people forget. Fire is not just heat, it's psychology. A central hearth burned day and night. Smoke escaped through the roof, but not completely. That smoke cured the wood, preserved the house, and kept insects away. Smart design, ruthless efficiency. But here's the darker truth. Not everyone survived. Winter was a filter. The weak perished, the strong adapted, and adaptation went beyond buildings and food. Vikings changed their bodies. High-fat diets, heavy physical work, constant exposure to cold from childhood. Their metabolism became a weapon. Cold water was normal. Snowstorms were normal. Fear of winter? That was not normal. And then comes the part no one talks about, the mindset. Vikings did not see winter as an enemy. They saw it as a test sent by the gods. Endure winter, earn honor, die well, reach Valhalla. When your belief system turns suffering into glory, survival becomes easier. Think about that. While others prayed for warmth, Vikings trained in frost. While others waited for spring, Vikings sharpened axes. And here's the biggest twist. Winter made them stronger for war. Cold weather built endurance. Scarcity built discipline. Darkness built mental toughness. By the time spring arrived, they were not weakened survivors. They were hardened predators ready to sail. That's why raids often began after winter. Months of preparation exploded into action. So no, they didn't magically resist cold. They engineered their world around it. They stored, adapted, trained, believed, and they accepted loss as part of life. That acceptance removed fear, and when fear disappears, survival rates rise. Now think about today. A power outage for one night feels like a crisis. A snowstorm cancels schools. But 1,000 years ago, entire communities faced minus 30 degrees Celsius as a season, not an emergency. The real secret wasn't thicker walls or bigger fires. It was discipline months before the snow fell. It was community over comfort, preparation over panic, and a mindset that said, winter is coming. Good, let it come. Because when you can survive the darkest, coldest months on Earth. Without modern technology, you don't just endure winter, you become unstoppable. Most people think surviving minus 30 degrees Celsius is just about keeping warm. But for the Vikings, warmth was only the beginning. The real survival trick was movement and routine. They didn't sit idle waiting for snow to pass. Every day had purpose, even in deep winter. Men chopped wood for the hearth, repaired tools, tended small indoor gardens of sprouted grains, and trained for battle. Women tended animals kept in barns connected to the longhouse, milked goats, churned butter, and preserved it for months. Children helped, learned skills early. Every action was a survival mechanism disguised as daily life. And food, it wasn't just about calories. Vikings understood nutrition in ways we often forget. Fat was life. Fish oil, reindeer fat, preserved meats, their diets were engineered for endurance. It's a twist modern science has only confirmed recently. High-fat diets in extreme cold improve energy and immunity. But there was more. Vikings didn't just eat to survive. They ate strategically. Certain foods were reserved for sick or weak members, some for warriors, some for elders. Community survival mattered more than individual desire, and while their bodies adapted physically, their minds adapted even more. Darkness wasn't just a time to hide indoors. It was a season for planning, strategy, and storytelling. Sagas weren't just entertainment. They were oral encyclopedias of survival. Every tale of sea voyages, battles, or monster encounters held lessons. They reinforced courage, ingenuity, and caution. Imagine a family sitting around the smoky hearth as a storm rages outside, learning in whispers how to read clouds for ice patterns, how to check meat for spoilage, how to track wild game under snow. Knowledge was survival. And then there's clothing, not fancy capes or fur coats like movies show, but layered, intelligent garments. Wool inside, linen next, sometimes animal skins on top. Layering trapped heat, wicking away moisture. Shoes were thick, flexible, often stuffed with moss for insulation. Vikings didn't fight winter with force. They outsmarted it with materials and technique. Even their hygiene had a survival angle. Soap made from animal fat and ashes not only cleaned, but reduced infections and cuts and scrapes, preventing deadly winter illnesses. And speaking of illness, winter brought disease as much as cold. Crowded longhouses could turn deadly. That's why ventilation and heat placement were calculated. Smoke drifted to the ceiling, carrying away bacteria-laden air, while heat stayed below where people slept. And Vikings used herbs from summer harvests, juniper, thyme, garlic, to boost immunity. Think of it, centuries before modern medicine, they applied empirical science born of observation. But the real secret, mindset, fear of cold could kill faster than frostbite, so they reframed winter. It was a challenge, a teacher, a test from the gods. Surviving wasn't optional. It was honor, and honor motivated action when hunger gnawed, when the wind cut through layers of wool, when sleep became a battle to stay alive. Their social structure reinforced this. Elders taught, warriors defended, children observed and imitated. Everyone had a role. That role meant purpose, and purpose meant mental strength. Then came the harshest truth. Loss was inevitable. Not every child, not every elder survived, but the ones who did were hardened, experienced, resilient, and the community learned from every death, adjusting tactics for the next winter. Adaptation wasn't theoretical. It was mandatory. And here's a twist. Many miss Vikings thrived in winter because they also embraced discomfort daily. Cold baths, walking bar, foot in snow, working outside in frost. These weren't torture. They were conditioning. By the time winter peaked, their bodies had learned to generate heat efficiently, to conserve energy, to metabolize fat rapidly. They weren't just surviving. They were physiologically, they were physiologically optimized for it. And while Europe shivered indoors waiting for spring, Vikings had turned winter into a training ground. Mental endurance, physical strength, strategic thinking, all sharpened under extreme conditions. That's why raids after winter were so successful. The cold had already shaped warriors into disciplined, focused, almost unstoppable fighters. And here comes the emotional beat. Imagine the pride, the fearlessness, the community spirit forged by months of shared struggle. Winter wasn't an obstacle. It was a forge, and every day spent inside those long houses was a hammer shaping Viking society. And the final reveal, the real secret behind surviving minus 30 degrees Celsius without modern tools, was not a single technique, it was layering. Layered clothing, layered nutrition, layered knowledge, layered social structure, layered mindset. Each layer reinforced the others, making cold, darkness, hunger, and disease manageable. Take away one layer, and survival becomes precarious. Keep them all, and you don't just endure winter, you dominate it. So the next time you complain about a snowstorm, remember, Vikings lived through months of minus 30 degrees Celsius darkness with nothing but ingenuity, preparation, and relentless discipline. That's why, when winter came, they didn't just survive, they became stronger, smarter, and unstoppable. Their winter mastery wasn't luck. It was method, mindset, and a deep understanding of nature. And that, finally, is the lesson history books never give you. True survival isn't reacting to the storm. It's preparing long before it even hits, turning every hardship into advantage, and letting nothing, no, not even the coldest winter, break you. By now, you might think the secret of Viking winter survival is just about buildings, food, and clothes. But that's only half the story. The real edge came from understanding the environment itself, turning threats into tools. Ice, snow, and freezing winds weren't just obstacles. They were resources. Frozen rivers became highways for sleds, carrying supplies, and snow-covered plains hid game that could be tracked and hunted. Even the long, dark nights had purpose. Stargazing, navigating by moonlight, and planning spring expeditions. Every challenge sparked innovation. Take the hearth, for example. It wasn't just fire, it was a multifunctional survival hub. Smoke, warmth, light, cooking, curing food, drying clothes, and Vikings didn't just sit by it passively. They rotated tasks around it. Someone tended the fire while others repaired tools, prepared meals, or crafted weapons. The hearth structured daily life. And then there's water, frozen, scarce, dangerous. Yet Vikings mastered it. They melted snow strategically, boiled it to kill bacteria, and stored it for days. Even ice became a tool. Blocks insulated food, protected storage pits, and strengthened building walls. The environment itself became part of survival strategy. But survival also demanded constant alertness. Predators, wolves, bears, even rival clans, didn't hibernate out of respect. Viking families stayed vigilant, using watch rotations at night and early morning. Doors, simple as they seem, were reinforced with ingenuity. Animal hides, wooden bars, and clever locking mechanisms. And while modern people panic about isolation, Vikings thrived in it. Solitude honed resilience. Families learned to entertain themselves, educate children, and maintain morale. Storytelling wasn't just culture. It was psychological armor against despair. And here's a twist you won't find in textbook. Say, Vikings didn't just adapt to winter physically, they adapted emotionally. Months of cold, hunger, and darkness could crush morale. But the Norse reframed suffering as ritual, as test, as training for life. Every snowstorm was an opportunity to learn patience. Every frozen night taught endurance. Every scarcity reinforced creativity. And that creativity extended beyond immediate survival. Winter was time to innovate, sharpen tools, repair boats, construct sleds, weave clothing, experiment with preservation methods. Longhouses became workshops. Every household became a hub of engineering, strategy, and preparation. And while adults trained in these ways, children absorbed lessons through play, imitation, and storytelling. By adolescence, they were already seasoned survivors. That's why Viking society could endure what would crush most civilizations. But let's not romanticize. Winter also killed starvation, illness, accidents, frostbite. Loss was constant, yet survival built on loss. Every winter, the strong survived and passed knowledge forward. The weak perished, leaving communities leaner, wiser, and tougher. And here's a psychological revelation. Vikings didn't fear death. They expected it. That acceptance removed panic and hesitation, replaced it with calculated action. Even today, modern humans struggle to comprehend that mindset. But it made the difference between thriving and dying. And here's the twist that shocks many. Vikings didn't just survive winter. They used it to prepare for domination, raids, battles, voyages. Winter sharpened warriors' reflexes, stamina, and mental toughness. By the time spring arrived, they weren't just recovering, they were primed. Months of hardship became a launch pad for power, and their secret wasn't a single heroic action. It was layering, layered preparation, layered mindset, layered community effort. Every element supported the others: insulation, nutrition, movement, training, vigilance, and belief. Remove one, and the system fails. Keep them all, and winter becomes an advantage. And the most surprising part, many of these practices echo modern survival science. High-fat diets, cold exposure, strategic hydration, layered clothing, community cohesion. Vikings were centuries ahead, applying empirical survival principles without laboratories or textbooks. And yet, despite all their knowledge, luck played a role. Storms, disease, raids. They couldn't control everything. That uncertainty shaped adaptability. Flexibility became as crucial as strength. Mental agility was survival. And finally, the payoff. When we think of Viking survival, we imagine brute strength or daring raids. But the truth is subtler and far more impressive. Survival was methodical. It was deliberate. It was engineered at every level: body, mind, home, and community. Every snowstorm, every frozen river, every dark night was accounted for. By the time spring thawed the world, Vikings emerged not just alive, but honed physically, mentally, strategically. And the lesson for us today: survival isn't magic. It's preparation, adaptation, community, and mindset. Vikings teach us that extreme adversity doesn't just test life, it sculpts it. When you combine intelligence with endurance, ritual with action, belief with pragmatism, even minus 30 degrees Celsius becomes a challenge you can master. So next time you complain about a chilly winter or a power outage, remember, people thrived under conditions far harsher than you can imagine. Not because of luck, not because of courage alone, but because they engineered their survival in layers, anticipating every difficulty, embracing every hardship, and using the world itself as a tool. That's the Viking's secret. And when you see winter not as an enemy, but as a teacher, when you prepare, endure, and adapt, you aren't just survive. You become unstoppable, just like they did.